Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a time when soap was a luxury, bathing was a rare indulgence, and the smell of a room told you far more about its occupants than you'd ever want to know. The air in colonial America wasn't just scented with fresh bread or wood smoke, it carried the tang of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and the faint sour note of chamber pots emptied a little too close to the back door. This is the world you're about to wander through, a world where hygiene wasn't just inconvenient. It was an ongoing battle against filth, disease, and the elements. And honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this, not without a strong stomach and an even stronger immune system. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling social, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a dusty street in a small colonial town in the mid-1700s. Wooden houses line the road, their clapboard sides weathered to a soft gray. There's no pavement, just packed earth that turns to sticky mud after rain. To your left, a woman in a bonnet is sweeping her front stoop, but the bristles of her broom kick up more dust than they remove. A man walks past, carrying a bucket of water from the town pump, his boots caked with dirt. The water sloshes over the rim, darkening the road in streaks. The scent of the place hits you in whoas. It's a mix of wood smoke from cooking fires, the sharp tang of tanned leather, and something more unpleasant, the earthy ammoniac smell of waste. The outhouses stand a little way behind each home, but they're shallow pits, often uncovered in summer heat, and the odor drifts freely. In some yards, you notice the telltale wet patch, where chamber pot contents were dumped. You follow a narrow alley between two buildings where laundry hangs on sagging lines. The garments are dingy even after washing the whites closer to cream or beige. Soap, when available, is made from lye and animal fat, harsh enough to eat through fabric if used too often, so clothes aren't scrubbed daily. Instead, families wear garments until they're visibly soiled, then wash them in batches, sometimes just once every few weeks. You think about the undergarments people wear: linen shifts for women's shirts, for men absorbing sweat, and oil rarely changed more than once a week. A child darts past you barefoot, his toes black with dirt. In the colonies, many children go without shoes in warm weather to save leather for winter. Their feet toughen against splinters and sharp stones, but the dirt works its way into the skin, staining it. A mother nearby pours a small bowl of water over her son's hands, before a meal rubbing them briskly, though no soap is in sight. In most households, water alone is considered enough for daily washing. The idea that invisible germs cause illness hasn't yet taken hold. You're invited into a home, a small, dimly lit room with a low ceiling and a single window. The family's main living space doubles as a kitchen and sleeping area. In one corner, a wooden wash tub leans against the wall. It's used for laundry, but occasionally, if someone is ill or if there's a rare holiday, for bathing. Bath water is carried in bucket by bucket from the pump outside, heated over the hearth, and poured into the tub. The whole process can take hours, so it's reserved for special occasions. Most colonists rely on dry washing, rubbing themselves down with cloths, or partial washing of face, hands, and neck. The smell inside is warm and close cooking stew mingled with the scent of drying herbs, wood smoke, and the faint musk of unwashed hair. Hair itself is another story. Men's wigs, often powdered with starch or scented oils, conceal hair that's rarely cleaned. Women's long hair is braided or pinned up combed to remove lice when necessary, but full washing is infrequent, maybe once a month. Water and soap are simply too precious to waste. You step outside again and notice a small stream running behind the houses. It's shallow, its banks muddy, and you can see where someone has thrown the gray water from washing dishes. A few yards upstream, a woman is scrubbing clothes against a wooden washboard, her hands red from the cold water. Downstream, a group of boys splash and shout, their bare limbs slick with water. It looks refreshing, but you know the water carries runoff from latrines and barnyards upstream. Drinking from it would be a gamble. Night begins to fall, and lamps are lit whale oil in glass chimneys casting flickering yellow light. The shadows seem to deepen the smells of the town as cooler air settles over the streets. You think about lying down to sleep in one of these houses. The straw-filled mattress, the shared blankets, the faint smell of smoke and sweat rising from the bedding. This is the reality of colonial hygiene, not the clean, crisp past imagined in paintings, but a constant negotiation with dirt odor and the limits of the time. And tomorrow it will start all over again, because in this world, keeping clean isn't about perfection, it's about survival. You wake with the first pale light of dawn, the faint chill of the early morning creeping in through the gaps between wooden planks. The room smells different now, less of smoke, more of damp wool, and the faint sourness of sleep sweat trapped in bedding. You stretch, but the mattress beneath you is lumpy, the straw inside shifting unevenly. It's not the soft sealed padding you know today. This straw has been in the tick for months, flattened under countless nights, and now carrying dust mites and the faint must of mildew. In the colonies, replacing the straw isn't done weekly or even monthly. Sometimes it's turned or fluffed to extend its life, but new straw is gathered only when the old is hopelessly foul. The morning routine is a modest one. A small basin of cold water poured from a jug the night before stands ready on a side table. You cup the water in your hands to splash your face, feeling the shock of cold. There is no warm tap to coax you into waking, only this bracing, simple rinse. You rub your face dry on a rough linen towel, stiff from repeated use and sun-drying. If you're lucky, it smells faintly of wind and grass from the last wash. More often, it's just clean enough to pass. Teeth brushing isn't the crisp, minty ritual you might expect. If a family can afford it, they might own a tooth powder made from crushed charcoal chalk, or ground oyster shells rubbed onto the teeth with a rag, or a small, natural bristle brush. But for many, rinsing the mouth with water, or even just rubbing teeth with a damp cloth, is the whole routine. Tooth decay and bad breath are accepted facts of life. Outside, the town is stirring. A woman at the far end of the street carries a sloshing bucket from the pump. Another hurries to the well before the queue grows. Water is at the heart of every household's hygiene, but it's labor-intensive to fetch and heavy to carry. That effort alone limits how much is used. You can't afford to throw it around for frequent baths or endless laundry. Every bucket has to count. The town pump itself is a social hub. People greet each other, exchange news, and swap advice while they wait their turn, the squeak of the handle echoing in the morning quiet. The water is clear, cool, and likely safe if the well is deep enough, but in some settlements, shallow wells are easily contaminated, leading to outbreaks of dysentery or worse. Passing by the blacksmith shop, you catch a metallic tang in the air, mingling with the scent of manure from the nearby stables. Horses are essential here, but their care brings its own hygiene challenges. The streets are speckled with droppings, some dried to powder, and carried in the wind, others fresh and steaming in the morning chill. In summer, flies swarm over them. In winter, the smell is muted but never gone. People step around the worst patches, but with no street cleaners, a thin layer of muck inevitably works its way into homes on boots and hems. You follow the path to the town green where women gather to beat rugs or shake out bedding. Dust fills the air in pale clouds catching the sunlight. These cleaning rituals are vigorous but infrequent. Each is a small battle against the inevitable creep of dirt. One woman tells you she boils her family's underclothes once a month in a great kettle over the fire, stirring them with a stick. The process leaves the cloth smelling faintly of wood smoke, not the sharp perfumes of modern detergents. Back in the home you're visiting, you watch as the eldest daughter combs through her younger sister's hair. She's searching for lice, parting the long strands with practiced fingers, the fine-toothed comb catching in tangles. If she finds any, she crushes them between her nails or drops them into the fire. It's a normal chore here, like darning socks or mending hems. Everyone from farmers to governors might have to deal with it. Hair care is about control, not glamour oil, or pomade is used more to smooth and protect than to scent. As the day warms, the smell of the town ripens. Cooking fires flare as stews and porridges bubble for the midday meal. The aroma is hearty but layered with the background notes of life without modern sanitation. The sourness of waste barrels behind the tavern, the faint fishy smell from the dockside, the tang of wet wool drying by the hearth. All of it weaves together into a scent that's as much a part of colonial life as the sight of tricorn hats or cobbled shoes. In the afternoon, you follow a farmer home from the market. His small holding lies just beyond the edge of town, where his family tends a vegetable garden and a few livestock. The yard is tidy by colonial standards, but the pig pen still carries its distinctive musk, and the chicken coop is alive with scratching, clucking, and the faint ammonia bite of droppings. The farmer's wife shows you their water source, a barrel that catches rain from the roof. It's used for washing clothes, scrubbing floors, and sometimes for rinsing feet before coming indoors. Rainwater is softer than well water, making it gentler on fabrics and skin, though it's rarely boiled before use. Inside, you notice a small corner shelf holding the family's prized store of soap. It's rough, brownish, and unevenly shaped, each bar cut by hand after curing. Made from a mix of animal fat and lye, it's powerful but caustic scrubbing. With it leaves your skin dry and tight. It's used sparingly for laundry special washing days, and sometimes as a hair wash when nothing else will do. Bathing with soap from head to toe is almost unheard of. As dusk falls again, you reflect on what you've seen. Hygiene here is not about chasing freshness or fragrance. It's about managing what you can with the resources you have. Dirt, odors, and pests are constants like the change of the seasons. The people of colonial America don't dream of eradicating them. They focus on keeping them at bay day by day with the tools at hand. It's a different kind of clean one that feels less like a state of being and more like a daily truce with the world around you. The next morning begins not with the sound of an alarm, but with the rhythmic thud of an axe splitting logs in the yard. Firewood is the lifeblood of the colonial household, feeding both the hearth and the washtubs when they're in use. You step outside and feel the dew clinging to your shoes, the crisp air carrying scents from every corner of the settlement. Fresh cut wood mingled with the faint lingering truss of last night's smoke, and somewhere close the warm animal musk of a cow being milked. A few houses down, you see a woman bending over a wash tub, her sleeves rolled past her elbows. It's wash day, an all-consuming event that leaves no room for other chores. The water in her tub is already gray with soap, and she's pounding clothes with a wooden batten working stains out by sheer force. The air is damp with steam from the great kettle, simmering nearby, ready to refill the tub with hot water as it cools. Children carry buckets back and forth from the pump, their bare feet slapping against the packed dirt. Laundry is not a daily indulgence. It's an ordeal planned for. Most families will do it once a week in summer, less often in winter, when water is harder to fetch, and freezing temperatures turn the job into misery. Woolen garments, heavy with water, can take days to dry hung indoors, where they drip onto the floor, or out in the cold air, where they stiffen into boards before softening in the sun. The result is a wardrobe that's never completely fresh, always tinged with the scent of smoke from the hearth, the faint tang of sweat, or the earthy note of the soap used to clean it. Inside another home, you watch as a man sharpens a straight razor by the window's light. Shaving is more about function than style here, keeping hair in check to avoid lice or to maintain a neat appearance in public. Many men shave just once or twice a week, sometimes less in winter, when a beard offers extra warmth. For those without razors, a trip to the local barber is an occasional treat, though the tools are shared between customers and rinsed only in water between uses. The risk of infection is invisible to them, though sometimes painfully apparent after the fact. By midday, you're drawn to the open fields on the edge of town, where a group of women kneel among rows of flax plants. Flax is the backbone of linen production, and linen is at the heart of colonial hygiene. Linen undergarments worn closest to the skin absorb sweat and can be washed more frequently than outer layers. The women talk as they work their hands, moving quickly, the smell of fresh green stalks filling the air. Later, these fibers will be soaked, beaten, and spun into fabric, another labor-heavy process that shapes the pace of life. Every clean shirt or shift represents hours of work, making each garment valuable and well-guarded. As the day wears on, the heat builds, and with it the smells of life intensify. The town's privies are at their most pungent in the afternoon sun. Some families dig new pits when the old ones fill, covering the waste with soil, but others simply let them overflow, the leaching runoff seeping into nearby streams or gardens. The link between waste and disease is not yet widely understood, though experience tells people that bad water brings sickness. Still, without modern waste management, even careful households can't entirely protect themselves. At the tavern, you see another side of colonial hygiene. Men gather at rough wooden tables, tankards in hand, sharing news and laughter. The air is thick with the scent of ale, unwashed wool coats, and the faint tang of tobacco smoke. Pipes are passed around between friends, their stems wet from use. No one thinks twice about it. The concept of personal space is far looser here. Bodies pressed close in conversation, voices, booming hands, clasping and greeting. Germs may travel freely in these rooms, but in an age before germ theory, the exchange is seen as the mark of camaraderie, not risk. You notice the town's healer sitting in the corner, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a small leather pouch. Inside are her tools, tweezers, a small knife, and a few glass jars filled with ointments. She's as much a hygiene worker as a medical one, removing splinters, lancing boils, and sometimes cleaning wounds. Without antiseptics, she relies on spirits like rum or vinegar for cleansing their sting, a sign in her mind of effectiveness. It's a rough kind of care, but it's often the only thing standing between a small injury and a dangerous infection. Late in the afternoon, you follow a family down to the riverbank. They've come to wash themselves, not a full bath, but enough to feel freshened after a long, hot day. The parents wade into the shallows, scooping water onto their arms and faces, while the children splash with more abandon. No soap is used. The water is cool and cleansing on its own, at least in the moment. Upstream, another family is doing the same, their voices carrying over the gentle current. The river is a shared space for hygiene recreation, and sometimes even drinking water, its multiple roles, a necessity born from scarcity. By the time the sun dips low, casting golden light over the fields, the rhythm of the day shifts again. People retreat to their homes, some to cook the evening meal, others to prepare for bed. Candles are lit, their wax dripping onto holders that haven't been cleaned in weeks. The scent of tallow mingles with the earthy, familiar smells of the household. You think again about how here, cleanliness isn't an absolute state. It's a fleeting achievement always undone by the demands of life. Every day the same cycle repeats, and every day people meet it with a blend of resignation and quiet pride. The evening is cool and you're lulled into sleep by the muffled chorus of the settlement, the creak of a wagon rolling over uneven ground, the distant bark of a dog, the low murmur of voices that seem to fade into the dark. But when dawn comes, you wake to the scrape of chairs and the soft tread of bare feet on wooden floors. Colonial mornings are brisk because firewood is precious and every minute of daylight matters. Today, the family you're staying with begins their chores in earnest. The mother starts by heating a small pot of water over the hearth, enough for everyone to splash their faces and hands before breakfast. This water is poured into a large ceramic basin that sits in the center of the table. The family takes turns, eldest to youngest, cupping their hands, wetting their skin, and wiping with the same rough towel. No one changes the water between uses. To modernize, it's unthinkable. Here, it's efficient. Soap, even the coarse homemade kind, is kept for occasions when dirt is visible or smells too strong to ignore. You watch the father sit by the door, pulling on his stockings. They've been worn for days, the wool holding on to both warmth and the faint scent of sweat. Freshness isn't expected, durability is. The leather shoes that follow are sturdy but stiff, showing white salt lines from last winter's snow. In the corner, the children tug on their linen shifts and breeches, the same ones they wore yesterday and the day before. Only the very wealthy can afford to keep large wardrobes, and clothing is mended again and again until the fabric is more patch than original cloth. You step outside with them, feeling the morning air heavy with dew. The grass soaks your shoes as you walk toward the garden where the day's work begins. Hygiene here is inseparable from labor. Hands plunged into soil, feet trotting through mud, clothes brushing against plants and animals. These are the marks of life. After hours spent tending the rows, the only washing is a quick rinse at the pump before eating the dirt lingering under nails and along the creases of palms. In town, the blacksmith's forge is already lit, the glow inside casting sharp shadows on the ground. The air near his shop is thick with the smell of burning coal, mingled with the sour tang of sweat. You notice a small wooden bucket near the door, filled with cloudy water, where he's rinsed his hands and tools. This water will be used all day until it turns opaque, then tossed into the street. It's not that people don't want cleanliness. It's that the effort and resources required to achieve it simply don't match the pace of their lives. Around midday, you're drawn to the home of the town's midwife. Her living room smells faintly of dried lavender and rosemary herbs she uses both for scent and for their supposed cleansing properties. She keeps sprigs tucked into bedding, slipped into clothing, even boiled into wash water when possible. In a world where true disinfection is unknown, people cling to these herbal solutions not just for the pleasant smell, but for the belief that they ward off illness. You see her preparing a small pouch of crushed herbs to give to a young woman who will keep it in her pocket for health. Later, you pass the tavern again and hear laughter spilling into the street. The doorway smells of ale and unwashed coats. Inside, the tables are sticky from spilled drink wiped only occasionally with damp rags that do more to spread the residue than remove it. Tankards are reused without thorough cleaning, and the shared pipes pass from mouth to mouth without a thought. It's a place where hygiene takes a back seat to fellowship. In the afternoon heat, the scent of the town intensifies again. Outhouses bake in the sun, their smells curling into the air like invisible smoke. Flies gather in clusters, landing on anything left unattended, bread crusts on a window ledge, a baby's sticky cheek, a rag left to dry. People swat at them absent-mindedly, as much a part of daily life as the chiming of the town bell. Near the edge of the settlement, you watch as a butcher works at an outdoor table. His hands, stained with blood, move deftly through the task, and though he wipes them on a rag, there is no washing before he turns to serve a waiting customer. The meat is wrapped in paper or cloth and taken away without refrigeration. Only the speed of consumption and the cold of the season keeping it safe. It's another reminder that hygiene here operates on a different clock, one tied to the rhythms of nature and the limits of the tools at hand. By evening, the streets are quieter. The scent of wood smoke rises again as families gather for the evening meal. Stews simmer in iron pots, the mingled smells of meat-root vegetables and herbs masking the more stubborn odors that cling to every home. Candles are lit, shadows flicker across walls, and the familiar closeness of the air returns warm, scented with living bodies and tinged with the work of the day. You realize that for the people of colonial America, clean is not about removing every trace of dirt or odor. It's about managing them, living alongside them, and keeping them from tipping into sickness. It's a constant balance, one maintained not by abundance, but by resilience and habit. And tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, just as it has for years, with the same tools, the same challenges, and the same quiet determination. Morning in the colonies often begins before the sun has fully risen, especially in summer when the light comes early. You wake to the sound of a rooster calling from somewhere beyond the fence, and the muffled rustle of movement in the room around you. The air is cooler now, carrying a faint damp edge from the night's dew, and the scents of the house feel more muted smoke from yesterday's fire, now stale, mingling with the soft musk of wool blankets and the dry, grassy smell of the straw tick beneath you. The family begins their day with the same measured rituals you've already grown accustomed to, each person taking their turn at the water basin hands, and faces splashed, a shared towel passed without hesitation. You notice that the father pauses to scrape at his chin with a knife he's sharpened on a whetstone, dipping it in water between strokes. There is no foam, no lather, just the cold scrape of steel against skin. When he finishes, he rubs his face briskly with the towel and moves on, leaving the next person to use the same water. The eldest daughter prepares the breakfast table. She works with clean hands, though they still carry faint traces of garden soil from the day before, deep under her nails where no quick rinse can reach. In the center of the table, she sets out a loaf of coarse bread and a crock of butter, the latter covered with a thin cloth to keep flies away. You notice one land on it anyway, shooed away with a flick of her hand before anyone else sees. The idea of germs is foreign here. Spoiled food is judged by smell and sight, and insects are simply part of the background. Once the morning meal is eaten, chores take over. Today is one of the few days set aside for deeper cleaning. The mother brings out a broom made from bound twigs and begins sweeping the floor. The packed earth in the kitchen is swept clean of crumbs and debris, though the fine dust rises and settles again almost instantly. In the sleeping area, the bedding is pulled outside into the sun, shaken vigorously to release dust and pests. The mattresses, heavy with straw, are too large to move often, so they're beaten in place with a stick to loosen the dirt. The sunlight is the closest thing they have to sterilization, believed to sweeten fabrics and ward off illness. Outside, you hear the rhythmic pounding of a rug being beaten over a wooden fence. It's a job that fills the air with a choking haze of dust and grit, but it's also one of the few ways to keep cloth and fibers in usable condition. Rugs are too costly to replace often, and the effort to keep them serviceable is as much about frugality as it is about comfort. At the edge of the yard, a small shed houses the family's few tools for personal hygiene. A comb with teeth worn smooth by years of use, a tin of homemade ointment for chapped hands, and a single bar of soap cut in half to make it last longer. The soap, a dull brown and faintly sour smelling from its tallow base, is used sparingly. Today, the youngest boy will have his hair washed, a once-a-season event, unless lice or illness demands more frequent care. The water is heated over the fire, the soap rubbed between hands to create a thin lather, and his head is scrubbed briskly. He protests at the sting when the soap gets in his eyes, but when it's rinsed away with a bucket of clean water, his hair feels soft and smells faintly of smoke and animal fat. The afternoon draws you toward the marketplace. Here, the mingling of scents is overwhelming: fresh fish displayed on wooden boards, beside baskets of vegetables still damp from the garden, the sharp sweetness of apples next to the iron tang of blood at the butcher's stall. Vendors handle goods with bare hands, passing them from customer to customer without any thought of washing between transactions. Money changes hands, each coin already worn smooth and dark from years of passing through countless palms. Beyond the market, you find a small stream where several women have gathered to wash clothes. The water is cold and clouded with silt, but it's moving, and that's what matters. The women kneel at the bank, scrubbing garments against flat stones, the sound of fabric slapping water, carrying over the chatter of conversation. Soapy foam floats downstream where a boy wades in to catch frogs. No one warns him away. The water is simply part of life, both tool and plaything. As the sun lowers, you walk back through the town. In front of one home, herbs hang in bunches from the porch, beams sage, thyme, and lavender drying in the late summer air. They will be used for cooking, but also for cleaning, boiled into water, to wash floors, or steeped into a rinse for hair and linens. The belief in their power is strong, and in some ways it's not misplaced. Though they cannot kill invisible microbes, their oils can mask odors and deter some pests. By nightfall, the family settles again into their familiar routines. The fire is banked low, candles flicker against the walls, and the air indoors grows still. You realize that even on a cleaning day, the house does not feel clean in the modern sense. There is still a trace of smoke, the smell of wool, the faint lingering tang of sweat. Yet here it is, fresh enough to call it a good day, the kind where the sheets have seen the sun, the floor is swept, and the comb has passed through every head in the household. The rooster crows again before the first blush of light spills over the rooftops, and you're already aware of movement in the house. The faint shuffle of feet, the creak of the door hinges, and the muffled thud of the woodbox lid signal that another day is starting in the same deliberate rhythm it always has. You notice that the air inside the house, heavy and close from the night, changes almost instantly when the door is opened. The early morning breeze slips in, bringing with it the scent of wet grass, distant wood smoke from other chimneys, and a faint earthy smell from the outhouse at the edge of the yard. The father heads outside to fetch water from the pump. The pump handle squeals in protest, and the water splashes into a wooden bucket, darkening the wood with moisture. This bucket will serve many purposes before the morning is over, filling the wash basin, watering the animals, and topping off the cooking pot. Water is never fetched idly. Each trip is a planned investment of time and effort, so waste is unthinkable. Inside, the mother has already set the kettle over the fire to warm a small amount of water for a more thorough wash than usual. Today is Sunday, and that means church. The family will want to look and smell their best, which in colonial terms means at least rinsing away the week's most stubborn traces of labor. The heated water is poured into the large ceramic basin, and each family member in turn dips a cloth into it, wringing it out, before scrubbing their face, neck, and hands. The children giggle at the warmth unused to anything other than cold splashes from the pump. Soap makes an appearance today, but only for the most visible parts, faces, hands, and for the women, the fine linen caps that frame their hair. Clothing for church has been aired out overnight, hung near the hearth to soften and warm. These garments aren't freshly washed. They're simply the cleanest the family owns, brushed to remove dust and lint and scented lightly, with sprigs of lavender tucked into pockets or sleeves. Hair is combed thoroughly, men's beards trimmed or at least smoothed with damp hands. For women, a fresh ribbon or a cap free from stains is a sign of respectability. The scent of the household changes with these preparations, herbs mingled with the faint soapiness of tallow and lye, all layered over the base note of smoke that never truly leaves. As the family walks toward the meeting house, you notice how the entire settlement seems to shift its rhythm. Neighbors greet each other on the road, some carrying children, others walking briskly in small groups. You catch the mixed smells of Sunday finery wool warmed by the sun, beeswax from polished shoes, faintly sweet herbal rinses, and the unavoidable hint of sweat from the walk. In the crowded meeting house, these scents mingle into a warm human cloud. There is no thought of deodorants or perfumes in the modern sense. Scent here is part of the communal experience, for better or worse. The service lasts hours, and by the time people spill back into the sunlight, the air outside feels sharp and fresh. Families linger to talk, children chase each other through the grass, and for a brief moment, the settlement feels lighter, cleaner, if only in spirit. The walk home is quieter, the earlier polish giving way again to the demands of the day, gathering eggs, tending the fire, starting the midday meal. In the afternoon, you join the mother in her small garden. She wears a wide-brimmed hat to keep off the sun, though the brim is stained from years of use. Her hands, despite the morning wash, are soon darkened again and by soil as she weeds between the rows. She tells you that she scrubs her nails only on Sundays using a sliver of soap and the edge of a small knife to scrape away the week's buildup. It's a practical habit. There's no point in keeping them spotless when the work never stops. Nearby, the eldest daughter draws water into a smaller bucket and sets it in the sun. This will warm over the afternoon and be used to rinse the children. Before bed, not a full bath, but a bucket wash each taking a turn with the same water. Soap will be skipped this time. The warmth alone is comfort enough after a dusty day. As dusk approaches, the smells of cooking rise again through the settlement. The family's pot of stew is rich with root vegetables and a small piece of salted pork. Salt is a preservative, but it's also a flavor that masks the inevitable slight sourness of meat that isn't perfectly fresh. The pot is shared from ladles passing over bowls, and any spills on the table or floor are wiped up with a cloth that has seen better days. Later, as candles burn low, you realize that the rhythms of colonial hygiene are inseparable from the rhythms of colonial life. Cleanliness isn't a separate activity. It's folded into every chore, every errand, every meal. And while Sunday might bring a small step toward formality and freshened faces by Monday morning, the cycle will begin again, its pace dictated by the seasons, the weather, and the stubborn reality of life, without the conveniences you take for granted. The next morning, a soft mist clings to the fields and drapes the rooftops in pale gray. The air smells of damp earth and chimney soot, and you can hear the muted sounds of the town, waking boots scuffing over dirt paths, the splash of water being poured from buckets, the faint ring of a hammer somewhere in the distance. Inside the house, the fire has been coaxed back to life, filling the room with a low, steady warmth that mixes with the lingering scent of yesterday's stew. Today is not a special day, no church, no market, just the quiet work of keeping life moving forward. The family's routine is stripped to its essentials. A quick splash from the water basin to wipe away the grit of sleep, a shared towel hung on a peg to dry between uses. The father rinses his mouth with cold water, swishes it briefly, and spits it into the ashes by the hearth. The children pull on yesterday's clothes without complaint, and the mother ties her hair back with a faded strip of cloth. You watch as the youngest child is sent outside to fetch water from the rain barrel. The water inside is tinged a faint brown from roof runoff, but it will do for washing vegetables and cleaning the floor. In the colonies, rainwater is a gift, especially in dry seasons when the well runs low. A small wooden ladle floats inside the barrel, used to scoop water into smaller containers. There is no talk of boiling it for safety. It is judged fresh enough by sight and smell alone. In the corner of the main room, a small pile of laundry waits for attention. It is not enough for a full wash day, but the mother kneels to rub a few pieces clean, mostly underclothes, and the baby's soiled linens. She uses a sliver of soap, her hands working quickly over a wooden washboard, before wringing the cloth dry. These items will be hung by the hearth to finish drying the warmth of the fire, pulling out the last traces of damp. Mid-morning brings you to the edge of the settlement, where you follow the father to tend the animals. The pig pen is thick with the smell of manure and damp straw, but the pigs are healthy, their snouts rooting happily through the muck. The chickens peck in the yard, scattering dust and feathers into the air. Hygiene here means regular mucking of the pens, scattering fresh straw, and keeping water troughs free from too much slime. It is a constant fight against smells and flies, a fight that can never truly be won. On the way back, you pass a neighbor standing in her doorway, with a comb in one hand, and her daughter in front of her. The comb is fine-toothed, pulling sharply through long hair, and each time the teeth catch on something, the woman pinches it away and flicks it into the dirt. Lice are such a fact of life that no one is embarrassed, only annoyed. In homes that can afford it, a special knit comb made from bone or wood is passed down through generations. Boiling it in water is one of the few ways to ensure it is truly clean. By midday, the sun has burned away the mist, and with it the smells of the morning shift. Now the town is scented with hot wood, baking bread, and the sharper edge of drying fish laid out on racks near the river. You notice a boy scrubbing a wooden bucket at the water's edge, the soapy water spilling into the current. Just upstream, another child scoops water into a jug for drinking. Neither family seems concerned about the overlap. Water is water, and the flow is trusted to cleanse it. In the afternoon, you return to the garden. The earth is soft from recent rain, and the family works barefoot toes sinking into the mud. When the work is done, they rinse their feet in a shallow basin, the water turning cloudy almost instantly. There's no changing it out between people. Instead, the next person simply stirs the water with a foot before stepping in a quick swirl to loosen the dirt. A rag is passed around for drying, and the basin is dumped in the grass when everyone is done. Back inside the floor is swept again. The broom's bristles are fraying, scattering as many bits as they collect, but it's better than nothing. A pail of water with a handful of crushed herbs steeped inside is used to wipe the table and wash the few dishes from the midday meal. The herbal scent is strong mint sage and rosemary, masking whatever lingering odors cling to the room. As evening falls, the town seems to fold in on itself, doors closing, shutters drawn against the night air. The smells of the day soften into a mingled warmth, wood smoke, wool, the faint metallic tang from the iron pot hanging over the fire. The family sits close to the day's dirt and sweat, accepted as part of their lives, not something to be scoured away immediately. Tomorrow will bring another rinse at the basin, another round of sweeping, another fight to keep the line between comfort and squalor from tipping too far in the wrong direction. The morning greets you with a damp chill, the kind that seeps into your clothes before the sun has a chance to warm the earth. You step outside and feel the ground soft underfoot, the smell of wet leaves mingling with the ever-present undercurrent of livestock and wood smoke. A few houses down, someone is already splitting wood, each strike echoing down the lane. That sharp, resinous scent of fresh-cut pine feels almost clean in this world of layered, lingering odors. Inside the household is already deep into its morning rhythm. The mother is crouched by the hearth, feeding small sticks into the fire to coax it higher for boiling water. Today is hair-combing day, and that means gathering the family in turn to sit on the low stool by the window for better light. A wooden comb is run slowly through each head of hair, the teeth catching on tangles, and occasionally unwelcome guests. For the children, the process is a mix of boredom and squirming discomfort. For the parents, it's a chore that must be done before problems get worse. A clean head is less about soap and water than it is about vigilance. The father tends to the family's shaving. He dips the razor into a small pewter cup of hot water, the steam rising faintly, and scrapes along his jaw in slow, practiced strokes. The blade is wiped on a cloth between passes, and once finished, he pours the cooled shaving water into the basin, where it will be reused for rinsing hands or wiping the table. Nothing in this household is wasted, not water, not cloth, not effort. By mid-morning, the air is filled with the thump and slap of laundry being worked on down at the stream. You follow the sound, to find a cluster of women kneeling at the bank, skirts hiked up out of the water, sleeves rolled high. Some use lye soap, its acrid scent drifting in the breeze. Others simply rely on vigorous scrubbing and the cold current to do the work. The water here is cloudy from upstream use, carrying flecks of foam and stray threads of fabric, but it flows swiftly enough to seem fresh. Children play at the edge, their bare feet sinking into the muddy bank, splashing in water that moments ago rinsed someone's underclothes. Further along, you pass the town's tanner. His workyard is a place where hygiene and necessity are constantly at odds. The smell is overwhelming, rotting hides, sharp lye, and the smoky tang of curing fires. Men work bare-handed, scraping hair from hides or soaking them in vats. These same hands will later carry bread at the tavern or greet neighbors in the street. It's not seen as careless. It's simply how life works, when every trade demands its own grime. By midday, the sun burns through the mist, and the warmth stirs the less pleasant scents of the settlement. Waste from the animals, scraps from the butcher's block, and chamber pot contents tossed into the yard all mingle in the air. A dog noses at a pile of discarded fish heads near the dock, and flies rise in shimmering clouds when you pass. Yet life goes on undisturbed. This background is normal, a constant low hum in the sensory landscape of colonial living. In the afternoon, the household turns to cleaning its woodenware bowls, spoons, and plates that have been in use all week. These aren't scrubbed with soap. Instead, they're scoured with sand or ashes, rinsed with the cleanest water available, and left in the sun. The abrasiveness removes grease and stains, while the sunlight is believed to sweeten them. The smell of scorched wood sometimes lingers, but in this world, that scent is reassuring. It means the dish is ready to be used again. Later, you find the mother tending to the family's supply of herbs and remedies. Bundles of dried mint sage and wormwood hang from the rafters, some destined for cooking, others for the wash water, or to be tucked into clothing. She crumbles a handful of dried rosemary into a bowl, mixing it with hot water to steep. This infusion will be used as a rinse for the bedding later, a practice meant to keep pests at bay and leave behind a more pleasant smell. Whether it works or not, the sharp herbal scent fills the room and cuts briefly through the heavier odors of daily life. By evening, the family gathers by the hearth to share their meal. A pot of pottage simmers slowly, the savory steam rising to meet the smoky air. Hands are rinsed before eating, but only lightly, and everyone dips into the same loaf of bread, the same crock of butter. The firelight plays on their faces as they eat, and you realize that in this place, cleanliness is less a final state and more a continuous, shared effort. It's woven into every motion, fetching water, sweeping floors, combing hair, not as a luxury, but as a necessity for survival in a world where the line between comfort and illness is never far apart. Outside, the night deepens, and the sounds of the settlement fade until only the soft creak of timbers and the distant lapping of water remain. Tomorrow will bring more combing, more scrubbing, more small victories against dirt and decay. And though the results will never match modern standards here, they are enough. The morning begins with a low, steady rain that patters against the roof and runs in thin streams down the ruts in the road. The sound is soft, almost soothing, but in the colonies, rain is more than a mood, it's an opportunity. The father is already outside, shifting the rain barrel to catch the fullest flow from the roof. The water that collects here will be precious softer than well water and far easier on skin and fabric. Inside, you can hear the mother calling to the children to gather their soiled shifts and shirts. Rainwater days are perfect for small-scale washing. The clothes are brought to the hearth, where the mother kneels with a low wooden tub. She ladles in rainwater from a bucket and adds a few handfuls of crushed soap root, an herbal stand-in for lye soap when supplies are low. The milky froth that rises is faintly sweet-smelling, and she works it into the cloth with her hands, scrubbing especially at the collars and cuffs. The youngest child is put to work carrying more rainwater from the barrel, dripping as he runs back and forth. Outside, the barrel overflows and a trickle runs through the yard toward the pig pen. The father is working there, shoveling out the worst of the muck, while the rain keeps the air from turning too foul. It's a thankless task, but one that must be done to keep the animals healthy and the flies from multiplying too fast. He wears boots thick with caked mud, the tops splashed with filth. When he's finished, he rinses them in the same runoff that flows from the barrel, scrubbing with a stick before stepping back inside. There's no special disinfectant, no soap, just water and habit. Mid-morning, the rain lets up enough for the mother to take the cleanest of the washed clothes outside. She hangs them on a line strung between two posts, the wet fabric flapping slightly in the breeze. Some pieces are still faintly stained, but the goal isn't spotless perfection. It's to keep dirt from building up so much that the garment can't be worn. She steps back to admire the small, dripping parade of shirts and underthings, their pale colors bright against the gray sky. In the kitchen, you notice another cleaning ritual unfolding. The eldest daughter is scouring the iron cooking pot. It's been in use nearly every day for years, and its surface is dark with seasoning. She doesn't scrub it shiny, no one would think to do that, but instead uses a handful of coarse salt and a damp cloth to lift away the grease from yesterday's stew. When she's finished, she wipes the rim with a sprig of thyme, the herbal oils clinging to the metal. It's as much about scent as it is about cleanliness, a small act of making the pot ready for the next meal. Later, you accompany the father to the dockside. The rain has left the wooden planks slick, and puddles catch bits of floating straw and fish scales. Fishermen are gutting their catch right there on the boards, tossing the unwanted parts into the water for the gulls. The smell is strong, fresh fish layered over the deeper, older scent of brine and rotting seaweed. Hands are wiped on aprons not washed, and the same knife that cleans one fish will be used on the next without pause. It's an economy of effort, not a disregard for hygiene. Time is simply too precious to wash between every task. By afternoon, the air is heavy with damp. Inside the house, the mother uses the opportunity to beat dust from the bedding. She drags the feather tick to the doorway, thumping it with a flat paddle until clouds of fine gray dust rise and drift into the yard. The rain has settled much of the airborne dirt outside, but indoors, every surface holds onto a thin film of it. She wipes the table with a rag dipped in rainwater scented with rosemary, then wrings it out and hangs it by the hearth to dry. Before supper, the family gathers for a quick wash. The basin is filled with rainwater still cool from the barrel. Each person takes a turn dipping a cloth and wiping their face, neck, and arms. It's not enough to truly scrub away the day, but it leaves the skin freshened, the mind feeling reset. The towel passed around at the end is damp and faintly herb-scented, proof that at least a little of the day's grime has been chased away. When night falls, the air still smells of rain and wood smoke, a cleaner scent than most evenings. The bedding feels lighter, the clothes on the line drip in the breeze, and the family settles around the hearth with the quiet satisfaction that comes from small but meaningful victories over dirt. Tomorrow, the mud will dry into dust, the animals will soil their pens again, and the daily balance with the mess of life will resume. But for now, there's a sense of having gained a small advantage, a rare feeling in a world where hygiene is always a game of inches. The morning after the rain carries a different energy. The air is clearer, lighter, and the roads, though still soft in places, no longer hold the same sucking mud underfoot. You wake to the sound of the mother pulling laundry from the line, the garments now stiff in spots from drying in the damp breeze. She shakes each piece briskly before folding, the scent of rainwater and air clinging faintly to the fabric. It's not the floral freshness you know from modern detergents. Instead, it's a plain, honest smell, clean enough to pass the unspoken test of colonial life. Inside, the father is already at work scraping mud from his boots with a stick. The drying earth has left pale crusts that flake off easily, scattering onto the stoop. He wipes the bottoms on a rag, then hangs the rag on a nail by the door. That same rag will serve for several more days' worth of boot cleaning before it's washed, if it's washed at all. The children watch him work, one of them clutching a small tin cup of well water for sipping between chores. Breakfast is quick bread left from yesterday, a wedge of cheese and a small bowl of porridge. Hands are rinsed before the meal, but there is no soap involved. The ritual is more about removing visible dirt than about unseen threats. You notice that the youngest child dips both hands into the basin and then rubs them on his shirt before sitting down. No one scolds him. His shirt already bears the stains of many such mornings. Mid-morning brings a round of sweeping. The mother moves through the rooms with her twig broom, raising small clouds of dust in the process. She pauses to lift the edges of rugs, shaking them enough to loosen crumbs and dirt, but not enough to warrant a full beating outdoors. The dust settles quickly, and she will repeat the process tomorrow and the day after. A clean floor is a moving target here, one that only exists in moments before life scatters it again. In the yard, the eldest daughter is cleaning the family's wooden water buckets. She uses a mix of ashes and water to scrub the inside, the gritty paste scouring away any buildup. When she's done, she rinses the buckets in the stream, the cold water numbing her hands. Ash cleaning is a common trick here, valued for its availability and effectiveness, even if it leaves a faint, smoky smell behind. At the edge of the settlement, you pass the cooper's workshop. The cooper is bent over a barrel, hammering its hoops into place. His hands are dark with grime, his shirt stiff with old sweat, but he works without pause, the rhythm of his hammer echoing through the lane. The barrels he makes will hold everything from salted meat to rainwater, and they'll be cleaned only when absolutely necessary, rinsed perhaps, but rarely scrubbed with soap. By midday, the sun is strong, and the smell of drying earth fills the air. It mingles with the sharper tang of tanned leather from the cobbler's shop, and the faint sourness drifting from the tavern where spilled ale seeps into the wooden floorboards. The tavern keeper tosses a bucket of water over the threshold to wash the dirt from the entry, but the water quickly turns brown, running in thin rivulets into the street. In the afternoon, you watch the mother tackle one of her least favorite tasks, emptying the chamber pot. She carries it to a spot behind the garden, far enough from the well to feel safe, and tips the contents into a shallow pit. A quick scattering of dirt helps mute the smell, but the sharp ammonia tang still lingers. She rinses the pot with a splash of water and sets it in the sun, believing the light will cleanse it more than any soap could. Later, the children are sent to collect herbs from the edge of the woods. They return with armfuls of mint sage and yarrow, their hands and clothes carrying the green bitter scent of crushed leaves. These herbs will be hung to dry, tucked into bedding, or crumbled into wash water. The smell fills the house for a short while, momentarily lifting it above the heavier scents of smoke wool and human presence. Evening settles in with the familiar rituals. Hands are rinsed, faces wiped, and the table set for supper. The basin of water used for washing before the meal is cloudy, now holding the traces of every hand that touched it. The towel, too, is damp and streaked, but will be hung to dry for use again tomorrow. The family eats by the fire, the glow softening the roughness of the day. As the night deepens, the sounds outside fade, replaced by the occasional crackle from the hearth and the slow breathing of those already asleep. The house still carries the sense of work of life and of the unshakable truth that in colonial America, cleanliness is always temporary, an achievement made enjoyed for a moment, and then surrendered again to the inevitable pull of labor and time. The first light of dawn spills into the room, through narrow gaps in the shutters, casting long, pale stripes across the floorboards. The air is still cool, edged with that early morning dampness that clings to everything before the sun burns it away. You hear the father outside his boots crunching over gravel as he heads to the well. The rope creaks and the bucket splashes down into the water below. Each draw is a small labor, the crank squealing as he hauls the bucket up, spilling a little with every step back to the house. This morning's haul will have to stretch far, drinking, cooking, washing hands, and perhaps a small rinse for the baby's linens. Inside, the mother has already begun her quiet preparations. She pulls the bed covers back to let the straw mattress breathe. Dust motes dance in the light as she shakes the blankets, sending tiny puffs into the air. The bed ticking itself hasn't been emptied and refilled in months, but a quick fluffing and a day in the sunlight will help keep the smell from turning sour. She smooths the sheets' coarse linen clean enough to pass inspection, though they bear faint yellow shadows from long use. The eldest daughter sets about cleaning the pewter plates from last night's meal. There is no hot running water. Instead, she heats a small kettle over the fire, mixing it with cold well water in a shallow wooden tub. The plates are scrubbed with a rag dipped in ash and sand, a method that scours off grease while leaving a faint metallic tang. Once rinsed, they're set in a rack by the open window to dry in the breeze. Mid-morning brings the smell of the smokehouse. The father has been tending it since before sunrise, checking on the strips of meat hanging inside. The air is thick with hickory and salt, the scent clinging to his clothes and skin. He will carry that smell for the rest of the day, no matter how many times he rinses his hands. In the colonies, these lingering scents aren't considered unpleasant. They are simply the perfume of honest work. In the street, you pass a neighbor drawing water into a shallow trough for her animals. She uses the same ladle to fill her own wash basin, setting it just inside the doorway for the family to use before their midday meal. There's no thought of cross-contamination. The water's freshness is measured by its clarity and its coolness to the touch. Nearby, a boy kicks a ball through the dirt, sending up clouds that drift into open doorways and settle on every surface inside. By afternoon, the sun is high, and with it comes the familiar swelling of odors. The privies behind each home are at their most pungent, the air thick enough to taste if you walk too close. Some families scatter lime or ash over the waste to keep the smell down, but in the heat, the effect is fleeting. A dog noses at the edge of one pit tail, wagging lazily until it's shooed away. You stop at the weaver's house where the woman is rinsing her dyed yarn in a large wooden tub. The water runs blue as she squeezes the skeins staining her hands. She'll wash them later with the same coarse soap used for laundry, but the dye will linger for days. In this world, clean doesn't mean pristine, it means rid of what will rot, what will attract pests, what will make life harder than it already is. Stains, smells, and the marks of labor are simply part of the body's landscape. Toward evening, the family prepares for one of their occasional full washes. A large wash tub is brought near the hearth filled with water bucket by bucket. The kettle is emptied into it to take off the chill, and the youngest child is bathed first. Soap is used sparingly, just enough to cut the oil and dirt from skin. The water quickly clouds, but it will serve for the next child, and perhaps the one after that. By the time the adults take their turn, the tub is a murky gray, the soap long gone, but the act of rinsing in warm water is worth it. When the water is finally thrown out the door, it steams briefly against the cool evening air before sinking into the dirt. The family sits together afterward, hair damp, skin flushed from the heat of the water. They smell faintly of smoke soap and the lingering herbal rinse the mother likes to use on hair. The freshness won't last long, tomorrow's work will see to that. But for now, it's enough to feel just a little lighter, a little cleaner, and ready to face another day. The following day begins with a thin veil of fog clinging low to the ground, softening the edges of the houses and fences. The air is damp, and as you step outside, the smell of wet earth mixes with the faint sourness of yesterday's wash water, which was dumped just beyond the garden fence. A rooster calls somewhere in the distance, and the faint metallic ring of a hammer on iron drifts from the blacksmith shop. Inside, the mother is already at work with her morning sweep. The broom's twig bristles scrape over the floorboards, pulling along a thin trail of crumbs, ash, and grit from the children's shoes. She works methodically, pushing the pile toward the open doorway, where she sweeps it out into the yard. Dust rises in the cool air, sparkling briefly in a shaft of sunlight before it settles back to earth. The father tends to the family's tools, axes, knives, and the small iron pots used daily. He polishes them with a rag dipped in animal fat, the smell heavy and unmistakable, then wipes them clean with a strip of linen that will later be boiled with the laundry. The concept of separate cleaning cloths doesn't exist. A rag that polishes an axe might also wipe a table so long as it appears free of visible grime. Mid-morning, the eldest daughter carries a small pail to the well, her bare feet leaving dark prints in the dew. She draws water and pours it into the family's wash basin for the first hand and face rinse of the day. The water is cold enough to sting fingers, but no one hesitates. This brisk shock is simply part of waking up. The shared towel is already damp from use and smells faintly of yesterday's work, but it's hung by the hearth to dry between uses, not washed daily. Down the road, you hear the sharp clap of rugs being beaten. You follow the sound to find two women draping heavy woven mats over a fence rail, striking them with wooden paddles. Each blow sends a puff of dust and grit into the air. They talk while they work, their laughter punctuated by the rhythmic thud of the paddles. The mats won't look new when they're done, but they will be free of the worst of the dirt enough to last another season. At the edge of the green, a small group of boys are sent to gather fresh straw for bedding. They return with armfuls of it, the golden stalks shedding bits as they walk. This straw will replace the oldest layer in the family's mattress, the change made just often enough to keep it from becoming damp and moldy. The scent of fresh straw is sharp and grassy, briefly masking the heavier smells in the sleeping area. In the afternoon, the family tackles one of the more tedious chores, cleaning the wooden floorboards with a mixture of sand and water. The sand acts as an abrasive scrubbed in with a stiff brush to lift away ground-in dirt. The gritty paste is then wiped away with rags, leaving behind a faintly rough surface that feels cleaner under bare feet. The process is slow, and the water in the bucket turns dark quickly. When the job is done, the bucket is carried outside and dumped near the garden, where the sand will settle into the soil. Nearby, you see the town's healer moving through her small herb garden, clipping stems of mint wormwood and lavender. She explains that wormwood will be hung in doorways to keep flies out, while lavender will be tucked into clothing chests to deter moths. These are small defenses against the ever-present pests, a layer of comfort and care in a world that never truly stops buzzing, scratching, or crawling. As the sun lowers, the family prepares for supper. The table is wiped with a damp cloth, the wooden bowls given a quick rinse in the basin. The same water is used for several dishes before it's tossed, and the towel used to dry them will be hung in the kitchen until the next wash day. Hands are rinsed, faces quickly wiped, and everyone sits down together, the day's grime accepted as a simple fact of life. By candlelight, the shadows in the room soften the hard edges of the day. The air smells of stew and wood smoke, with a faint undertone of herbs drying above the hearth. The floor feels a little cleaner underfoot. The bedding smells faintly of the fields, and though nothing here would pass for clean in the modern sense for the people of Colonial America, it's enough to know that today's work has held the untidiness at bay at least until morning. The next day dawns with a sharp, dry chill, the kind that makes the air feel thinner and every sound more distinct. You wake to the steady rasp of the father's whetstone, sharpening a small hatchet near the doorway. The metallic whisper of the blade against stone carries through the stillness, blending with the faint crackle of the hearth inside. The scent of wood smoke is heavier this morning. It clings to the rafters, to clothing, to hair, so much so that it's impossible to separate from the smell of the people themselves. The mother begins her day with a ritual that is as much for the spirit as for hygiene, airing the bedding. The feather tick is too heavy to carry outside, but she drags the blankets and sheets to the doorway, letting them hang in the pale sunlight. She believes, as many do, that the sun has a sweetening power, driving out bad air and keeping sickness at bay. Dust rises in soft clouds as she beats the cloth lightly with her hand, the motes dancing and drifting into the cold morning air. Mid-morning, the eldest daughter sits by the window, untangling a skein of wool. Her hands are clean enough from a quick rinse in the basin, though faint traces of soil are still pressed into the creases of her skin. The wool itself smells faintly of lanolin, and the barn a scent that will linger even after it's been spun, woven, and worn. No amount of washing can fully erase the origins of what people wear here. Garments carry the memory of their making. Outside, the father is tending to the privy. It's a task done infrequently, but necessarily digging a new pit when the old one is nearly full. The work is foul, the smell unmistakable, but it's part of keeping the household healthy, or at least healthier. He shovels a layer of earth over the waste to mask the odor, and in summer he'll scatter lime or ash as well. It's an unpleasant reality in a place where human waste must be managed by hand, but one that keeps the settlement functioning. By midday, the air warms enough for the mother to bring out the family's wooden washboard. She sets it near the rain barrel, dipping clothes into the cold water and scrubbing them against the ridged surface. The sound is harsh, rhythmic, and purposeful. Soap is rationed for the dirtiest items, work shirts, aprons, and undergarments. The rest are simply rinsed and beaten until the worst of the sweat and dirt are lifted away. Hung on the line, the wet fabric sags under its own weight, dripping slowly into the packed earth below. Near the center of town, you pass the cooper's yard again. The smell here is a mix of damp wood tar and the faint tang of sour ale from old barrels being repaired. The cooper's hands are blackened with work, his fingernails rimmed with grime that will not wash away without hours of soaking and scraping. No one remarks on it. It's the mark of his trade, as much a part of him as his voice or his gait. In the late afternoon, the family turns to smaller but equally important tasks. The eldest son cleans the family's lanterns, scraping the soot from the glass chimneys and polishing them with a rag dipped in vinegar. The acrid scent cuts through the smokiness of the room, briefly giving the air a cleaner edge. The mother wipes down the wooden table with water scented with crushed mint, the herbal fragrance spreading quickly before fading again into the underlying smells of the home. Evening brings the familiar meal-bread stew and the last of the apples stored from autumn. The apples are rinsed quickly in the basin, the skins left unpeeled, their faint, waxy feel unchanged. Hands are rinsed again before eating the towel passed from one to another without comment. The warmth of the fire and the closeness of the family make the air heavy, but it's a heaviness they're used to, even comforted by. When night falls, the shutters are closed against the cold. The faint herbal scent from the table wash still lingers, mingled with the sweetness of drying wool near the hearth. The day's efforts haven't erased every trace of dirt, smell, or wear, but they've pushed the balance toward livable enough for everyone to sleep soundly, without worrying about the mess creeping too close. And in the colonies, that small victory is worth the work. The morning breaks clear and bright, the kind of day that tempts even the most housebound soul outdoors. Sunlight spills over the rooftops, catching on the glint of frost, still clinging to the edges of fence rails and wagon wheels. The air feels sharper, cleaner, though in the colonies, clean is always relative. You step outside with the father as he heads to the well, his boots crunching through the thin ice that formed in shallow puddles overnight. Each pull on the crank brings up a bucket sloshing with water, so cold it stings the skin. He pours some into a smaller pail for drinking, and the rest into the family's wash basin inside the house. The mother greets the day with her sweeping, moving briskly from one end of the main room to the other. The broom bristles whisper over the floorboards, pushing along the grit that's been tracked in from yesterday's chores. When she's finished, she throws the gathered dirt outside into the wind, where it scatters almost immediately. The act doesn't transform the room, but it freshens the space just enough to make it feel ready for another day. Mid-morning brings a rare event, soap making. You watch as the mother tends a large iron pot over the fire in the yard. Inside, a mixture of animal fat and lye bubbles, and hisses the sharp, acrid smell rising with the steam. She stirs steadily with a wooden paddle, her face set in concentration. When the mixture reaches the right consistency, it's poured into shallow molds to cool. In a few days, these rough, uneven bars will be cut and stored precious for their ability to clean both fabric and skin, though they will leave both feeling dry and raw. The children linger nearby, curious but careful, warned of the burns the caustic lye can cause. While the soap cools, the father takes you along to repair a section of the privy fence. The air here is heavy with the sour smell of waste, but the repairs are necessary to keep animals out. A neighbor walks past carrying a pail of ashes. She'll scatter them in her own privy to keep the smell down and discourage flies. It's a small, constant maintenance, the kind that never fully wins the battle, but keeps it from tipping into something unbearable. By midday, the sun has warmed the frost away, and the family turns to their laundry. Today's wash is reserved for heavier items, wool blankets and thick work coats. These are carried to the stream where they're soaked, beaten with paddles, and rinsed in the cold current. The weight of the wet fabric is punishing, and by the time they're hauled back to the line, arms and backs ache from the effort. The coats will hang for days before they're fully dry, taking on the faint smell of the open air mixed with whatever scents they carried into the water. In the afternoon, the eldest daughter cleans the family's cooking utensils. The cast iron pot is scoured with ashes, the wooden spoons rubbed smooth with sand. The rinse water is poured out near the garden, the gritty residue settling into the soil. The smell of the ashes lingers on the utensils, but it's a clean smell by colonial standards, sharp, dry, and free from rot. Later, you follow the mother to her herb rack. She checks on the drying bundles of mint sage and lavender, turning them over so the air can reach all sides. A few sprigs are crumbled into a basin of warm water, which will be used to wipe the table and wash the children's faces before supper. The scent fills the air briefly, a bright note against the deeper background of smoke and wool. Evening draws the family indoors. The firelight softens the room, casting warm shadows across the walls. The freshly wiped table still glistens slightly from the herbal rinse, and the children smell faintly of lavender where the cloth passed over their cheeks. Supper is hearty but simple stew bread and dried apples. Hands are rinsed in the basin before eating, the towel passed along with practiced ease. As the candles burn low, you realize that today's efforts, the sweeping, the soap-making, the laundering, have nudged the home closer to clean than most days. But in this world, such a victory is temporary. Tomorrow, the same dirt, the same smells, the same inevitable wear will return. And yet for now, the home feels lighter, the air fresher, and the work worth it. The morning comes quietly, with a soft gold light seeping in through the shutters and the faint warmth of the fire that never fully went out in the night. The air inside carries the mingled scents of smoke-dried herbs and wool, the constant signature of colonial living. But there's also a faint sweetness from the bread baking in the Dutch oven by the hearth. The mother has been up since before dawn, kneading the dough, while the father sawed and split wood outside, the sound steady and measured in the stillness. The first chore of the day is a round of quick rinses. The wash basin is filled with cool well water, and each family member in turn dips their hands and splashes their face. It's a brisk, bracing wake-up, more about shaking off the night than about real cleansing. The towel, already damp from the first few uses, is shared down the line. No one minds the idea of a separate cloth for each person belongs to a future century. Mid-morning, you accompany the father to the tannery at the edge of town. The smell hits before you arrive, a potent blend of animal hides, lye, and smoke. The tannery is a place where hygiene is a constant battle against nature's decay, but it's also vital. Workers, their hands stained dark from soaking hides in vats, wear clothes stiff with residue. They wipe their hands on aprons before eating from a shared loaf of bread, unbothered by the mix of work and mealtime. In a place like this, the smell of the trade clings to a person long after the day is done, following them home and into bed. Back at the house, the mother is tending to the family's small collection of linens. These are the undergarments worn closest to the skin, meant to absorb sweat and oils so the outer garments can be worn longer without washing. She rinses them in the largest kettle she owns, adding a small handful of homemade soap shavings. The smell of the soap is sharp and animal fat heavy, but it's the scent of fresh here. The linens are wrung out and hung by the fire to dry their pale fabric, steaming gently in the warmth. In the afternoon, the children are sent to fetch more water from the well. They carry it in wooden buckets that have seen years of use, the insides darkened from constant contact with water and whatever else they've held. When they return, the water is poured into a larger barrel inside the house, kept covered with a wooden lid to slow the settling of dust. This will be the supply for the evening drinking, cooking, and the small washes before bed. The father spends part of the afternoon repairing a section of the fence near the privy. It's work done with quick efficiency, and afterward he rinses his hands in the rain barrel, the cool water running down into the grass. There is no soap, just a few brisk scrubs, before he dries his hands on his trousers and heads inside. As the sun lowers, the mother begins her evening cleaning. The table is wiped with a cloth dipped in herbal water, the scent of rosemary briefly brightening the air. The floor is swept, the sweepings tossed just beyond the threshold. The wash basin is set out again, and one by one the family rinses the day from their hands and faces. Hair is smoothed down with damp palms, clothes brushed free of loose dirt. Supper is eaten with the same quiet ritual as always, bread torn by hand, stew ladled into bowls, and conversation moving slowly around the table. The smells of the day, wood smoke, herbs, leather, and earth, are part of the meal, part of the home, part of the very definition of life here. No matter how many times a day hands are rinsed, floors swept, or fabrics aired, the colony will never be without its rough living scents. As night deepens, the family settles by the fire. The glow of the flames paints the room in warm tones, softening the edges of the worn furniture and the patched clothing. Outside, the air is cool and still, the stars sharp above the dark silhouette of the trees. Inside, the day's small acts of cleanliness have done their work not to transform the home into something spotless, but to keep it balanced, livable, and a little more comfortable than it was yesterday. And in the endless rhythm of colonial life, that is what hygiene truly means. The ongoing effort to make the roughness of existence just gentle enough to bear.